So I needed this lens review like 3 years ago. That's why I'm comparing these three lenses, and it might be a little bit of an odd lens comparison because one's a prime and two are zooms, but we're going to do it anyway. So today we're comparing the Sony 14mm G Master f1.8, the Sony 16-35 G Master 2, and the Sigma 16-28, right? And I've owned all three of these lenses, and I'm not going to show you any of them in this particular review because I only own one now, and I'll let you know what that is at the end. But I'm going to jump in and tell you the pros and cons of each lens first, and then the little kind of wrap-up review of all of them at the end, and which one I've decided to go with and why. All right, let's jump straight into it. So the Sony 14mm. So I used to be a prime guy, right? I loved primes, and that's the reason I got this lens when it first came out. It was a few years ago. I absolutely love this lens. It's super clean. So yeah, obviously the the primeness of it is beautiful. The 14mm, it's quite unique. Now, for context, I shoot real estate, so you'll see all the clips on screen of my real estate videos with these three lenses. If I'm being real with you, I actually shoot Blackmagic now, but me and my team still use Sony from time to time. So I'll show you all the clips, the most recent ones that I have on screen. But yeah, this 14mm served me super well. It's, as I said, it's very sharp, and I'm not going to jump in and do any weird pixel peeping or any of that because I think it's not really relevant to the average person, right? So, I'm just going to give you how it looks on screen, how it works with grading, and how clean it looks, right? Because, nobody's really pixel peeping. It's just about how the actual end product comes out. But yeah, the Sony 14mm, as I said, has served me super well. Obviously, the downside to it is, that it's not a zoom. But the huge upside is that it's f1.8. So when I'm shooting twilight properties, you can go that 1.8. Obviously, it's not going to be as sharp at 1.8. So you kind of lean towards 2, but that's still, almost a full stop more than the 2.8 lenses, right? The other benefits of that is if you're shooting tight spaces, you can obviously get, what is it? The difference between 16 and 14mm is like, 10, 15%. That's a lot when it comes down to it. So if you're really weighing it up and you're shooting tight spaces or you want to make spaces look really huge and, you're also maybe shooting in the dark, that's this could be a big benefit to you, right? In terms of the price point, it's a really good middle ground between the other two lenses, right? I don't know what it costs for you in your particular country. I'm not going to tell you what it costs in my country. But yeah, it's a good middle ground between the two. I think it's around the 1600 Australian. But yeah, I've really enjoyed using that lens. Obviously the downside is, you want to shoot like an agent intro, you want to be slightly tighter, then you're not going to be able to do that. If you want to get a little bit closer, you have to change lenses or get a bit closer and make the agent look wide, right? So, and it's a clean lens. Like you're always going to get a decent image out of it if you expose correctly. And yeah, you know how to work a camera. Obviously, that's kind of the expectation here, right? We're sipping on green tea today. And so yeah, just overall, I've really enjoyed using that lens over my career. Another downside, obviously, you can't pop NDs on the front of it. You got to pop them in the back. So that kind of forced me to be a little bit lazy because I didn't want to get random ND filters that I'm never going to use for any other lenses, So yeah, I would just rip up the shutter speed, which obviously made my footage look a little bit jarring because it wasn't as natural. And that's not ideal when you're outside in daytime. So, and the other thing is when it comes down to it, do you really need the 1.8 if you're on a Sony? You've got 12,800 as your second native ISO, which is beautiful. And so it's like, do you even really need the f1.8? Again, it's beautiful and really, really handy. And obviously at wide, because you're so wide, like it keeps a lot of stuff in the frame in terms of how much is actually in focus. But then you got to make sure you have to set your focus when you're rolling around through a house because, otherwise it might hunt for focus if it's at 1.8. It's not sure what it's actually focusing on. And then all of a sudden you've got a focus hunt in the middle of your shot. So you want to make sure you're getting focus right as well. So as you can probably notice, it's not a super structured review. I'm just kind of saying how I feel it, off the top of my head, my experience with the lens, all the goods and the bads. And, sometimes I think lens reviews and comparisons, they're a little too structured. So let's get chaotic for a little bit, my dude. But yeah, hopefully you can see on screen a lot of the 14mm shots, because it's a fantastic lens. But yeah, so moving on to the 16 to 35 G Master 2. Now I've noticed my friend had used this lens for quite a lot of shoots, and a lot of the time, he would just use this single lens. He runs a different company to me. Shout out, Gabe, if you're watching. And so yeah, sometimes he'll just shoot a house and only use the one lens. And I was kind of jealous of that. And when I shoot on Blackmagic, like I've got my, what is it? I can't remember. Tokina, 11 to 20mm, right? So that is a zoom lens. So I get to actually get different focal lengths and see the house from a different perspective, and depends on how you frame the home and how you frame the agent. You can obviously zoom in and, frame the agent a bit closer when you're doing that intro, or you can get tighter shots. And if you're shooting just an average house or even a huge house, you might not need to swap lenses. And this is huge because if you want to get in and out of a shoot quite quickly, then that can really help you, because you can just, shoot the house with one lens, get your slightly tights. If you want to crop in, you can crop in by 1.2 on the 35 range, and it just feels a little bit tighter, a little bit more intimate. And then, for example, on the 14, you'd have to swap to an 85mm lens or, a different lens to just get a different frame. Otherwise, you can't just get the whole house on a 14. So that's just going to slow your shoot down a little bit, because you've got to change lenses, run around, get different shots. And obviously I like getting variation of shots, but didn't really come into mind that it could be so easy if I'm just using the 16 to 35, for example, because you can just run around, use the one lens, which is kind of baller. Saves you a lot of time, and then also makes your editing job easier, because if you get a shot on the 16, pop it onto 35, and then in post that shot is immediately after the previous shot. Whereas with the 85, you're obviously shoot all your 14s, then shoot your 85s, and you've got to match those. Again, it's a small thing, but these things really add up depending on how many shoots you're doing. And some weeks we had 20 shoots. So these little things, it really, you got to take these things into account in terms of how long it's going to take switching lenses on set, how long it's going to add to the edit in terms of linking different shots to different shots. So using the 16 to 35 G2 is incredible. It's also extremely light and amazingly sharp. I actually cannot believe some of the images I'm getting out of this camera with this lens. The downside to it is the price, right? So, and this is when it comes into it. If you're a big bowler and you really care about getting the nerdiest, the nicest gear, then this could be the one for you, right? If you really want the best glass and you've got the cash for it, then go for it. Depends on where your business is at or where your hobby's at. And this is the thing. It's I'm a man of quality, right? I just really like to get the highest quality lenses, and I'm okay to spend money on that. And I know that it will have an impact on my business. I care about quality, right? So I'm happy to spend on better lenses, right? And there's a lot of reviews out there, a lot of people comparing a lot of different lenses, and the sharpness is negligible, as we will chat about. But in terms of overall, really. But just the colors out of this lens is really, really clean as well. Again, overall, I'm blown away by this lens. I'm absolutely in love with it. And when I'm using my 24mm, which is on right now, 1.4, other than that, it's pretty much that lens that's on my camera all the time right now. I'm obsessed with it, right? And the other thing is the 35mm range. It's a good range. You can really get to that end range of it. And it's just I feel like you've got so much room to work with from 16 to 35. Obviously, the downside, you're not as tight, right? You're on 16. But the thing is, I used to think that framing a home with as wide as you possibly can go is the play, making it look as huge as possible. But I've kind of moved on from that mindset, and I'm happier to accept there's actually nothing wrong with 16, right? So the other, obviously, upside to having a wider lens is that at the 14mm range, you're going to have a better stabilization, right? So that the tighter you're punched in, the less you are able to just naturally stabilize on the camera. It's going to pick up more shakes, right? So that's a small downside to the 16-35, right? And again, like the reason I was happy to score this lens was that it was $1,000 off in my country. I think I paid $3,000 for it, but usually it's around the 4,000 mark, and that's in Australian, right? So at that bargain, I was like, well, I'll give it a go. I can, I don't know, maybe sell other lenses to pay for a little bit of it. So moving on to the Sigma 16-28. Now we decided to get this for one of our employees because it's pretty much $1,000. It was like $1,100. Came with a free memory card as well. Not that we use it, but that's crazy because it's literally 1/3 of the price. It's also lighter. And yeah, also 2.8. So I was a little skeptical of this lens because again, you can watch reviews, but until you get your hands on it, until you see what it looks like out in the field, then you don't really know what it's capable of. But now that we've used this lens, I'm impressed. There are definitely times where you can see the quality difference. At least I can anyway, because I'm quite, used to intimately working with the grades of the camera and then what it looks like on each different lenses, especially if you're shooting kind of later at night at that really wide open aperture, then you're going to notice a drop in sharpness, right? And some shots, maybe not, depending on where the light is at, in the image. But a lot of the time, I'm able to pick that up. But, depending on where you're at in your business or creative journey, like if I knew what I knew now and I was closer to starting out, I would so happily pick up that lens because it's more than enough for, I would say, 80% of people, right? And again, if you know how to work a camera well, then, what's the A7S III cost? Like $5,000 or something. Like if you've got this $1,000 lens, like obviously lens can affect how clean it looks, but you're still going to get a nasty shot out of it if you know how to really expose correctly and, you're doing everything you can, popping up to that 12,800 aperture, staying away from 2.8 a little bit as much as you can, So all these little things, it's really, if you can work a camera and you've got this lens, like you're going to get really good results most of the time. So if I was to, as I said, go back, I'd probably jump on this lens and not look any other way until my business is making more than enough profit that I can justify buying a classier lens, right? Again, it's smaller than the 16-35 G Master. So it's nice and compact. It's actually so tiny and light, which, can make your gimbal experience better or worse, depending on how you prefer the weight of your gimbal. Now that I've used the Blackmagic, I definitely prefer heavier on my gimbal. And when I go back to Sony, it's almost hard to use because of how light it is, but I'm just used to that. So, but yeah, ultimately very impressed by that lens. I was convinced that we would need a 16-35. But yeah, as you can see from the footage, hopefully, you might not even be able to tell the difference between that lens and the other 16-35 and maybe even the 14. And that's part of the point of this review is that it's again, if you know how to use a camera, it kind of doesn't matter which lens you use, and with the 12,800 and as I said, I've kind of moved on from, it needs to be a prime and it needs to be as wide as possible. So I've just moved on from that mindset. And that's why, getting to the end here, I've kind of given you the pros and cons of all of these three lenses. To be honest with you, I have sold the 14mm and I'm just using the 16-35. And the other benefit to that is that I can use this with a lot of other types of videos, right? Agent pieces to camera, interviews, quickly zooming in and out when you're making more vloggy kind of content. You just have so much more freedom and variation with that lens. The 2.8 is more than enough for, 98% of situations, maybe 95% of situations. But ultimately, you're just so limited with that 14mm, and I can't believe I didn't pick up on that sooner, really. So, and again, if I was early on in my days, I'd be using the that Sigma 16-28 because it's crazy how much value is packed into that lens, right? And I'm strictly talking for video here, but yeah. So we still use that for a lot of our real estate shoots. One of the employees, but I personally use the 16-35 G Master 2, and I absolutely love it. And I wouldn't go back to any other lens. But again, I'm kind of obsessed with quality and getting every bit of, sharpness out of a camera, out of a lens that I can, right? So that might not be your biggest priority, because if your biggest priority is just making good work and getting it out quickly and, not spending too much money on your gear, then the Sigma is going to be so fine for you. So yeah, that's kind of like my overall review of these three lenses, just comparing them all. And again, if you're into astrophotography, or if you do like getting real wide, the 14 might be for you. And our photographer, he uses the 12 to 24 G Master, right? And that could also be the one for you. But I think that lens in Australia is like $5,000 or something, $4,500. So again, if you're bowling out, you got a huge budget, that could be the one for you. If you really want it to be, to be quite wide. But the other downside to the Sigma is that it's 28. And so again, you've got like, what's that, 28 to 35, you've got like 30% more of, tightness. So that focal length for me is also worth it on the Sony. Whereas the Sigma, you get to 28 and you're like, I wish I could just squeeze it out a little bit closer, So that's the other huge downside to that lens. And again, there's other alternatives, but these are just the ones that I've used. And yeah, so hopefully you've gotten some value out of this. I'd love to know what lenses you use, or which one you went with, or you go with, or you're leaning towards, or if I haven't mentioned any in this review that you do use, please let me know. So yeah, as I said, hopefully you've gotten some value out of this. This is just my kind of like rough review of these three lenses, comparing them all. Really enjoyed using them all. But at the moment, I'm hell-bent on the Sony 16 to 35 G Master 2. And yeah, we use the Sigma 16 to 28 still, all day, every day. And we still have the Sony 14 in the business, but I personally sold my one. But yeah, we're barely using that at the moment, unless it's for a really tight home. So yeah, all right. Well, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.